Hi, in this video I want to talk about focus and discipline when working remotely. This is something that I struggle with even after 8 years of working remotely very successfully. There are some days that it's just very hard to keep your mind on the task at hand. This could be because maybe you're doing some work that's not particularly engaging, like administrative work, which from time to time, unfortunately, we all have to do. It could be because you have been facing a problem for several hours or several days which doesn't seem to have a readily available solution, and you may feel that there's no way around having to solve that problem or no way to solve it, so you're kind of stuck up against it and you're not making any progress. Now, firstly, if you've got that kind of problem, as I've alluded to in one of my previous videos on communicating, it's best to ask your team for help. But if help is not forthcoming, or if no one has been able to help you and you really are stuck, it can be quite demoralizing and you might find it hard to continue to concentrate. The strategies that will work to alleviate this is going to differ for every person. So I'm not going to say to you that I have a strategy that definitely works, and I certainly don't have a strategy that definitely works every time. But I will share some of the strategies that I do have that do help. The first thing is, as I've said before in my video on setting up your space, you do ideally want a space that is dedicated for working remotely. If not, you want to at least be in a space that you have demarcated as your space for working remotely during work hours, and you need everyone else in the house to understand that that is your office. If you're kind of in a shared room environment, you're definitely going to want to block out the sound and the activity in that room. So listening to music on headphones, I find, helps. Sometimes even just listening to a radio station on headphones helps. If you're in a dedicated office, the same still applies. I often find that if I'm struggling to concentrate, turning on some music helps keep the parts of my mind that's prone to wandering a little bit occupied so that I can mostly focus on work. I have another technique that I try to use in order to keep me focused. And if I notice that I'm not focusing properly, that I'm getting easily distracted, that I'm not really making progress or not really even trying to make progress, then what I normally do is use what's called the Pomodoro technique. The idea behind this is that you set up blocks of work as opposed to blocks of rest throughout your day. And in general, if you're having a day where you're getting easily distracted and not focusing on work, while taking frequent breaks is going to decrease the total amount of hours you're working, if you keep yourself to the blocks of work and only allow yourself to be distracted or take a break during the break times, you're still going to get a lot more work done than if you have these indefinite breaks or indefinite lulls in activity. So how this basically works is you set up a Pomodoro or a focus session or whatever you want to call it. The recommended time is 25 minutes. Some people go for shorter times, some people for longer, but I do find that longer times are hard to stay with. So I go with the standard 25 minutes. Then you start the timer. And for some people, having a ticking timer, like an actual kitchen timer or a tomato timer, works. For me, I find it annoying, so I just use an app with a visual display and a notification at the end of the session. But basically, the idea behind this, you start a session for a set amount of time, for example, your 25 minutes, and during that time, you allow yourself only to focus on work. If you see or feel that you're getting distracted, you remind yourself, no, the session is still going on. I have to work now. And that's where, for some people, actually hearing the ticking does remind them that no, you are still in your work session. You do need to keep working. You need to keep pushing. Then at the end of that session, you want some kind of alarm bell, or you want the app that you're using to notify you, and then you must stop. This is the only way that this technique actually works. Once you get to the end of your 25 minutes or however long your session is, you have to stop. Then you will normally have a short break. Generally, what's recommended is 5 minutes. Some people recommend a cadence where you have 4 Pomodoros with 5 minutes in between them, followed by like a 15-minute break to allow you to go and have some coffee or do whatever else you need to do, just have a little bit of a rest and relaxation. That works for some people. I generally don't do that strictly. What I will do is follow the 25-minute Pomodoros with 5-minute breaks. And if I get to the end of a Pomodoro or a focus session and I feel that I'm a little bit tired, then regardless of how many there have been before it could have been 2, it could have been 4, it could have been more, I will stop and have a slightly longer break, like 15 or 20 minutes, go and have some coffee, maybe even step outside the house, just walk around the garden to let my eyes see the sky, just to relax a tiny bit and then come back. But generally, on days that I find it hard to focus or to stay disciplined and focused, I do find that technique does help me just to remind me that no, you now, for this time, need to focus on work. And because you do have the frequent short breaks in between, you don't get completely tired out. The idea is not to drive yourself like a slave, but just to work for a significant percentage of the day. And when you have these short breaks in between, it does allow you to just take a little bit of a breather and refocus yourself for the next session. The next thing to discipline and focus that I want to touch on quickly is working remotely when you've got other people in the house. This might be especially topical right now. During the pandemic, a lot of you may be working at home for the first time for medical reasons because you've been asked to isolate, or your region may be in quarantine or lockdown. If you're in that situation, it might be hard to explain to your family members or your housemates that you are now working and this is work time. But it is something you have to do because it's not fair to you or to them or to your employer if you're trying to do two things at once. Just to give you an idea of the level of discipline that's required here, most days my wife works from her office. She works for the government in an office across town. But on days that she's on leave, or if we're being isolated because of some medical situation, she is here at home. And on those days, she really supports me very well and understands that while I'm working remotely, I'm actually at work. To the extent that if she needs to talk to me or ask me something while I'm in my office with the door closed and working, she will actually send me a text rather than just come in and talk to me. And that might sound like an extreme example, but this is what would happen if I were at a physical office. She would send me a text. So she does the same thing while I'm here at home, which really helps because it means I'm not pressured to respond immediately. If I'm trying to finish something, I can finish it, and after a few minutes I can respond to that text message. And that is one strategy you can use. You can ask people in your house that need to talk to you to send you a text or get your attention some other way in which you're not forced to respond immediately. Then working remotely with children in the house, we're not parents, so I'm not going to try and offer any advice or give you any strategy because I simply don't have any. Normally, a remote worker cannot be the primary caregiver for a small child or a person with special needs. That doesn't work. It's not fair to your employer. It's not fair to your child or to the person that relies on you, and it's not fair on you. You're going to try to do two things at once. Your work is going to suffer and your care for that person is going to suffer. So if you are working remotely long term and you would normally have your children in daycare, you definitely will need to either continue taking them to daycare, or if you want them in the home, you would need to hire someone like an au pair or a nanny to take care of them in your home so that you can focus on work. If it's a short-term situation, perhaps because of a medical quarantine or some kind of emergency like that, if your partner is not working remotely, maybe ask them to care for the children if you have a partner at home. If you're a single parent and you're working remotely temporarily because of some kind of emergency, I have never been in that situation, so I can't really say that I can advise you on any strategy that will work there. The best advice I could give just from reading up is try and draw on your support network if you've got one available. Try and find a family member or a friend who perhaps is not able to work right now as well because of what's going on, and try and get them to care for your kids as best they can. Or try and plan your day around it. Ask your employer to be lenient. Maybe say that you will have someone to care for your children for a part of the day and you'll be available for that part, and try and negotiate on perhaps leave for the rest of the day, maybe the afternoon or whatever it is, to allow yourself to be able to focus on your work entirely and have your children taken care of.